been on the, yeah, for 28 years. I've been on the band for more than half of my life. I started out, I went to Northern Illinois University. Shortly before graduating, I was offered to come out on the band, but I had to finish school, so I graduated and then joined the band on the baritone saxophone chair for 3 months. And we were in Ellicott City, Maryland, Turf Valley Country Club. You know. We used to do a four-hour dance there every year. Unfortunately, we don't play that venue anymore, but Larry O'Brien was the leader at the time. And I heard the lead alto saxophone player, Greg Ridlington, was leaving. He was going to audition for the President's Own Marine Band. So I got it in my head. I said, well, I know I can do this. So I asked Larry, I said, you know, I'm interested in playing the lead alto chair. He said, you sure? I said, yeah, why not? So on the second set of the 4-hour dance, he said, well, we'll try it out. So during that second set, we were doing At Last, played At Last, and I had a page turn. I think Nick was singing at the time, maybe, Brian Anthony. But so on this page turn, and I'm not scared, but I'm concerned about how well I was going to play. So I'm doing this page turn, and the button of my coat knocked my clarinet reed, and it just like, so I'm like, how the hell am I going to play now? So I just barely pushed it up, and I was able to finish the set and got a new reed for the third set. And Larry said, you got the gig. I said, well, thank you. I'm going to enjoy this. So I didn't anticipate being on the band for 28 years, but it's been a hell of a ride. I love the orchestra. The traveling is, work is riding the bus. Playtime is the show, truthfully. And you know, the traveling in and out of suitcase and the hotel and all of that comes just with the territory. But playtime is the show, and that's what I enjoy the most. My favorite song in the book is number 1, Moonlight Serenade.
Yeah.
Get choked up. Sorry. Just a beautiful piece of music. And I'll never forget one of our tours in Japan. Julia Rich was our manager, and I think you were on the band too, Greg, drums. And we played in Hiroshima. And it was the only show in Japan that we got a standing ovation at the end of the show in Hiroshima. And I'll never forget that. I'm sorry. Just beautiful music, and I'm glad to be here. So it was
Good afternoon, my name is Greg Parnell, and I have some one-up with Kevin. I started in May of '96, so 29 years for me. I started as the drummer, then I became the assistant road manager, then the road manager, and then I moved to our office in Lake Mary, Florida, where I've been for 21 years. And I gave my notice that after 1 year of being with the band, I played with the band, I thought, hey, this was great, I'm ready to do something else. It's 29 years later, crazy. Anyway, it's been great. We're privileged to be able to attempt to keep this music alive, keep the band on the road. So, honored to be here today.
My name's Eric Stabna. I'm the music director of the Glenn Miller Orchestra. I joined in June of 2017, June 2nd of 2017, and so I've been on the road for just over 8 years with the band. Began as tenor saxophonist, and eventually started singing with the Moonlight Serenaders, and after the pandemic, when we got restarted, stepped in front as music director at that point. So actually, Clarinda was one of my first shows. I joined in June 2nd of 2017. About a week later is when we were here, so that was my first experience in Clarinda. I remember within a few days of joining the band, Nick Hilscher, who was leading at that point, approached me just to talk about some of the music, and he referenced that we're going to this Glenn Miller Festival, and I thought, what's the big deal with this Glenn Miller Festival? And I've come to understand after 8 years what the big deal is here. So it's been a great time. Our pleasure to be back here, and it's been a lot of fun, so thank you.
My name is Charles DeStefano, and I can one up all these guys. November 1980 was my first
Yeah.
Glenn Miller Orchestra joining the band. 1980, with Larry O'Brien, and so I spent I don't know, maybe less than 2 years with Larry. I was teaching, I was doing some freelance work, and then one day, after developing a relationship with David McKay Jr., I asked him, hey, maybe I can come work for you for a little while. That started in January 1984, and somehow I'm still here. So anyway, it's always a joy coming here, meeting everybody, having an opportunity to say hello, and if you have any questions, let's do it. Thank you.
Questions for, but before we do that, just a second, just before we do that, I have to ask someone in the audience to please stand, and I want you to please give this gentleman a round of applause, and here's why. We have in our midst someone who graced our company 2 years ago, but has been here in the past leading what's now the Glenn Miller Orchestra Scandinavia. Now you need to know, he's gone through some times where, we were a little bit worried about him in terms of his health and well-being, but he's fine. He's back leading the band in Scandinavia, which is, of course, licensed by and affiliated with these gentlemen, the Glenn Miller Productions. So please join us in a round of applause for our colleague, Jan Solitanis. Jan, please stand. Scandinavia is very prolific with posting videos of their performances, and I think everybody here would agree, they give the American GMO a good run for their money, but we're all friends in this and all affiliates, so thank you, Jan.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you. With that, any questions for the members of the band? Sir?
This is more of an observation rather than a question. But I've been following the Glenn Miller Orchestra since Ray McKinley was the director. I first met Ray at the Coliseum Ballroom in Davenport, Iowa. What a fine gentleman he was. I had a photograph I brought to that dance of Ray playing the drums, shirtless. That was kind of
Right.
And he laughed and he said, I look better in those days, and then he signed it for me. But I've followed this band for a long time. I've been a Glenn Miller fan since I was 5 years old, and I'm 85 next
Wow.
week. So, and the first time I saw you was at Forest View High School in Arlington Heights with Larry O'Brien. And one of the things I remember about seeing you, I see you guys every twice a year, so I follow you forever. At any rate, having that particular concert at Forest View was so close to O'Hara Field that every time Larry went to introduce a number, a plane would come over and he'd have to stop and wait for you guys to play. But that's a great memory. But I just wanted to say to Eric, following Nick Hilscher is one hell of an act to have to follow. What a great guy and such a trained vocalist. And I just want to compliment you and Jenny, because your vocalizations over the last 4 years have really, Jenny is terrific. If no one has heard her album, it's a fantastic album. And I just want Eric to let you know that you're evolving as a vocalist has really been marvelous to see. So thank you. And to the second, I've talked a couple of times to your office, Maureen. Yes. Yeah. Lovely lady. that suggestion is, my grandchildren have come to hear this band several times, and I've thrown to sing when we're at the Displaying Theater or near Acadia Theater in St. Charles. That there are young children coming who have no history of Glenn Miller at all. And it would be so nice when the band performs if they had maybe a portrait of Glenn Miller on the side of the stage. Eric does a good job, and Nick did too, in terms of giving a little bit of Glenn Miller's history, like on the redoing of In the Mood that Joe Garland originally gave him was kind of a rambling thing. And Nick told us how Glenn took his pencil to that, and what we hear today is a result of that. At any rate, it would be, I think, really behoove the band to have the image of Glenn Miller somewhere on that stage when they play for the people who are coming now and learning and enjoying Glenn Miller's music, but they know nothing about him. A couple of the bands that I've seen, whether it's the Dorsey band or what have you, they have visuals above the band, and as the band plays, it's just like a newsreel thing going on above. That is very effective. But even just having an easel with Glenn's picture to the right or to the left of the stage, I think would help the new people who are coming and becoming Glenn Miller fans to recognize him.
Yeah, so you said you're keeping the band going, but you should put in mind that next year will be what, 70 years? The band has been going?
Since 1956, we were under this company.
Right, so next year will be,
Do that, I guess that's good.
yeah, so it's more than just keeping it going, it's thriving.
Well, we're working at it. It hasn't become easier, so it is an everyday thing for us, right? Going to the office and making sure that we take care of business as
But
best
you
as
deserve a
possible.
big thank you whether you get it or not. You know, boss, thank you.
Thank you.
I have two questions. The first is, other than Clarinda, I'm just curious, what city or country do you generally find the most enthusiastic fans are? And then I guess my second question is, as Eric said, there's an expectation that half the book is played every single night as standards. After you've played some of these songs thousands of times, how do you keep it fresh and not boring for you as a musician?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really is something amazing to play this music almost every night of the week and all year long. In my case for 8 years, for Kevin, 28 years. I think when you play for a different audience every single night and you see the reaction to this music, whether it's Moonlight Serenade or In the Mood or Chattanooga Choo Choo, when you see the audience reaction, it reminds you that they're hearing this stuff for the first time live. And for that reason, it really doesn't feel old. We know In the Mood and Moonlight Serenade, memorized at this point over and over again. But playing for a new audience, it keeps the music interesting, it really does. So I've never had a challenge like becoming sort of like fatigued of the music for that reason. And I'll pass it to Kevin in a second, I'm sure he has a similar sentiment. As far as where we see the most enthusiasm throughout the country, it's a good question. I think it depends probably specifically on the venue. There's just some venues that attract like kind of a more vocal crowd or a more enthusiastic crowd. So I don't know if there's any particular region in the country. Maybe one example I could point to, and there's, I'm sure, dozens of examples. One interesting show that we play every year is in Pensacola, Florida. They have a big naval air base there. It's an extremely unique show where a lot of these folks from the community or from the military show up, and we play in a huge airplane hangar. So the Blue Angels airplanes are hanging above our heads, and we play all the big hits, and we play a lot of military music as well. That's like an incredibly enthusiastic crowd, a lot of fun. People are dancing in the back, and people are shouting out and having a great time. So like the uniqueness of that venue kind of lends itself to just being like a more kind of expressive show, a more fun show, a more enthusiastic show. But I think it kind of depends on the venue where we get that kind of crowd response.
This weekend, I think the Dorsey Band is playing the Boulder, Boulder,
Last night.
but that's like 4,000 people are there dancing. They all come, dressed to the nines, military garb. They have tanks, airplanes, all kinds of things. It's really done up nice. Unfortunately, well, we're here and they were there, but we did it last year, and it's always a big turnout. To answer your other question, being on the band for so many years, we play Moonlight Serenade at the beginning and at the end of every show. So, if doing the math, I played Moonlight Serenade over 10,000 times, and I still don't have the damn thing memorized. No, I do, but I always have the music there, just as in case I get a brain thing. But yeah, it's always a thrill. And further, my point is, I learned a long time ago. Quincy Jones told me this. He said, "You play every show as if it's the last time you're going to play, because someday it might be."
Yeah.
A little too sentimental.
This will give you guys a chance to wait as far into the weeds as you want for. But, yeah, sure. This gives you guys a chance to wade into the weeds as much or as little as you like, but for those of us who were amateur musicians, not professionals, who played in high school bands, and some of varying qualities and some not very good at all, like the one I was in, our high school stage band, we tried. Some of us tried harder than others. But anyway, what I'm getting at is when you hear a great professional band, you realize, having had that experience, how hard that is and how rare it is for that kind of group of guys to be that together and do it night after night, and maybe that's part of it. So my specific question would be, what do you do? It's one of the toughest band sounds to get right. It's easy to get wrong. There's so many ways for it to go off the rails, but you guys get it right. And one thing that struck us all here, the first and second row critics corner, was how on point you guys are this year. Not that you weren't before, but this year you are hitting it out of the park. What do you do to work on that sound, to be that tight and have it together night after night?
We'll start with our leader.
I think there's an ebb and flow to it throughout the course of like a single tour or throughout the course of a single year. So part of it is, personnel in the band changes over time. The group that we have now is going to be different than the group that we have in 6 months. So having the continuity of the section leaders, Kevin, George, Ashley, those guys know this music, they know the style of this music, and when you have strong section leaders, it's much easier for these new folks joining the band to get up to speed. So I have to give these guys a big compliment that way. And as personnel changes over time, the sound of the band, I suppose, changes a little bit. Every band has different personality this year versus last year. So I think we're lucky right now to have a very good group of musicians on stage. And even the way the band plays changes throughout the course of the tour. So we've been very, very busy this year. We've played a lot. I think up to this point, we started the tour in January. I think we maybe had like 3 weeks off since January. The band's been working quite a bit. So I think that adds to the continuity as well, playing this music more and just tightening things up. We've also, we've been rehearsing a lot lately. People often ask, when does the Glenn Miller Orchestra rehearse? When does the Glenn Miller Orchestra practice? The answer is not very often. We get to the sound check and we have maybe 30 minutes to kind of figure out the microphones and play through a new song if we have it, or just rehearse something old if we have it. But that's the typical schedule for the band day after day. However, we've been rehearsing all this 1937 music, and this has really been, I'm serious, for the last 2 months, like every sound check we've been playing through this stuff. So the band actually has been just playing more and kind of maybe just a little bit more focused in that regard than usual. And I'm glad, I appreciate that it's paying off.
I think the funny thing, some people in this room will recognize from the first Olympic tradition, whatever, but the previous comment, Dave's question about, about what helps you stay up and whatever, the very question, and even your answer about the crowds. And I look at that interview between Miller and Paul Douglas in 41, and the same question comes up and almost the same answer. It's the crowd. That crowd, we might get down, but that crowd lifts us up. And we're right there. But my question is to Eric. So this 37 book, did it, when you started looking at those charts, was it almost like you're looking at a different band? How did that feel? Because I know there's different character. If you listen to it, there's certain continuity that will continue forward, but how different did that feel looking at that music?
Regarding 1937 music, it's really been an interesting thing to take a look at this. I'd always known that Glenn had a band in 1937 and listened to some of the music, but it's a much different experience playing through this stuff and really getting to know the music quite intimately. The way it's arranged has similarities with the later band, but there's also a lot of uniqueness to it as well. Some of that is predicated by the size of the band, having fewer musicians in 1937. So you have 4 reed players. The reed stuff is fairly similar to what Glenn was doing years later. The brass stuff is much different. There's only 5 brass players. So the way that stuff is arranged is much different. For example, George, our lead trombone player, is playing a lot higher in his register than he would have in the later music, because there's only 3 trumpets, so instead of a 4th trumpet, sometimes George is playing in that register. Anyways, that's just one example of significant differences in the 37 music to the 38 music. Also, you can kind of see how Glenn maybe figured out a little bit more about the commercial aspect of music. The 1937 stuff is pretty dense. If we play a melody through, 4 times in a chart, Glenn will have written it differently each 4 times. And if you compare that with Tuxedo Junction, that's the simplest song ever, and it's a huge #1 hit. So I think Glenn kind of figured out what was going to be more commercially successful as well. It's really a fascinating thing just to listen through where the band was, where it ended up. And then we play a song like Passage or D last night, which is so much different, and we're only talking about less than a decade of evolution.
So I'll talk more about this at 3 o'clock. But a couple things that are interesting about that music. First of all, the copy work is a little sloppy, which I'm not sure how it came about. If you look at Glenn's scores, Glenn is meticulous. He's very neat the way he writes his scores. Then when the parts came out, I don't know if somebody was helping him crank out the parts for the individuals. But one interesting thing, you can tell by how the parts are marked, that in the rehearsals, that the individuals were making their articulation markings. So instead of Glenn, or I'm sure later on when Jerry Gray, probably more so Jerry Gray, he was right on top of everything. A lot of your articulations, whether it was a short note, long note, whatever you might have, was already there. So in these rehearsals, I'm sure this happened this way, each individual was marking their part. So they say, okay, this note's going to be short. The problem is one guy spells out the word short, the next guy puts a cap accent on it, which is another way of saying that short. The next guy puts a dot. One of the guys sitting there saying I'll just remember it, so I'm not going to mark it. I'm not a dummy. So I went through a lot of this trying to make it easier for the band to play. I spent hours at my house at the kitchen table trying to clean up these parts and make it so that each part is marked, as much as I could do, that they're consistent. So anyway, it's interesting music. Glenn really was a fantastic arranger. I don't know if he was the most creative arranger, but you knew if you were going to get an arrangement from Glenn that it was going to work, it's going to be right from the get-go. He really was fantastic with that stuff. So we'll see you at 3 o'clock to hear more about that.
Who's next? Here we go. Yeah, she's been waiting patiently in front of you.
Wait, okay. I know. To do a little sing while I come to. Just like everything to
Okay, I was just going to stand up here and talk. All righty, I've been coming here, I hate to say it, but a long time, haven't I? About 30 years, so I've heard a lot of music. But 2 years ago, I was sitting down here at the panel, and I'd heard the band the night before and saw this gorgeous, ambitious man up here running around. So he came in pretty soon, he sat 2 seats away from me. And I told him how wonderful the band was doing. I said, oh, your parents have to be so proud of you. Conducting this gorgeous big Miller band. He said, oh, my mother always loved the Glenn Miller music. I said, well, she's happy to see you out. So that's how I met you. So I went home and I told my granddaughter, you have got to come and hear this music because she's busy raising these kids. And I said, you have to come next year with me to the festival. You have to hear this wonderful man directing this music, all this ambition he has. He runs from one thing to the next, as you know. He's up directing the band, he's up there in the singing in the group, he's up there singing a solo, and your voice is so beautiful. Oh, I don't know how he does it all. And then he's singing with the group, and then he's directing, starting him on a song, and he's up. I mean, he runs constantly. Isn't that right? Well, he does. Yeah. Runs constantly. And this talent you have, and I love Nick. There's no doubt about it. He's got a gorgeous voice. But you do so many things. And your solos, I just love your solo voice. It's beautiful. But how do you get the energy? When do you sleep? Running constantly from down here up singing, doing all this and that. And of course that gorgeous Jenny, she's beautiful and beautiful voice, but I just love it. And the quartet, I love that because I sing in a quartet. But, and I do all the big band music because that's what retired you want to hear. They don't hear this young stuff, we don't learn it. It's not music. So anyway, how in the world do you do it all? And remember the year of the song and the year that this guy joined your group? And I mean, how do you have that memory? Explain it. I love you, you can tell.
I paid her to say that. You know, when we play this music every night, it's amazing how it becomes second nature after a while. It really is, you know, like Kevin said, he's played Moonlight Serenade 10,000 times. You know, you play this music enough and it does become second nature and you just get into a rhythm of it. So I suppose that's the whole reason why. And when do we get sleep? Apparently not when we're at the Glenn Miller Festival in Clarinda. We're up doing this in the morning. Actually, some of our band members are getting sleep right now. That's fantastic. But you know what? Yeah, you just get into a routine, and you know, I think I speak for the members of the band too, and I say it is exciting, and being part of this group is a lot of fun. We've got a great group of people on the band, so it's just a lot of fun, and we enjoy it. So thank you. I appreciate all that. Yeah, thanks.
I'll get to everyone's.
In speaking with the topic of the 37 band, I'm curious, I'm wondering, this is pre-Finnegan, pre-Gray. Now, who, may I ask, might have been some of the arrangers? Was it perhaps McIntyre, Jerry Jerome? I can't believe that Glenn wrote all the arrangements, but...
Probably 90% Glenn Miller.
There's a couple, Hal McIntyre, George Sarago. Almost all Glenn Miller. You can tell, even if it doesn't have his name, you can tell by his pen and the way he arranged. He arranged just like stacked notes. So he didn't, if they were the brass, saxophones are in different keys, but he's writing it as if you're playing it on a piano. And I think he did a lot of it. He had a good amount before he started the band. You can tell because they would have been how they played their first gig with only 2 charts, so they had a good stack. And I'll talk about this later, that even as early as July, and I'll talk about the library system, everything is numbered, you know, so you can tell when things were added with Glenn's library. But even as early as probably early July of that year, they're number 55. So I think Glenn was an incredibly hard worker with everything that he did. So a good question would be, when did Glenn sleep?
Thank you. Eric, I just wanted to circle back on one thing when you were talking about how the band is so cohesive. And I've played in a community band for 47 years, and the director provides a lot of that continuity. So you did not say yourself in that answer, so I'm saying it for you. Okay? And what I wanted to point out, this is my second time here, and as a kid, my dad, who's come here, maybe this is his 27th time, he's sitting in the back. He doesn't hear very well and doesn't see very well, so he wouldn't be able to understand the conversation going on. But he took me to see Count Basie Orchestra, and I was a kid, and the Count Basie Orchestra played at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, which is northwest of Muskegon, Michigan, where I'm from. And I had made a suggestion 2 years ago that it would be great if the Glenn Miller Orchestra could play at the Blue Lake Camp. They have a beautiful outdoor show, and you've got thousands of kids and a lot of people that, you know, come to the paid concerts. Some concerts out there are free, some are paid. But one of the things that really struck me yesterday morning when Glenn Miller Wolf was giving out the scholarship awards, he talked about these kids, these scholarship winners, they're the musicians of the future. But in order to keep the Glenn Miller sound and other classic sounds going to younger musicians, is you got to go where they are. And there's music camps, you know, probably all over the country. In Michigan, you know, we've got Blue Lake and we've got Interlochen, and when you play in front of all those students, you're sharing something that they may not get. Now, Blue Lake has a huge adult, they call it lifelong arts. So they've got a huge program for adult musicians. And I go there as an adult musician, and I go to band camp. It's still, and it's wonderful, you know, and they've got a big band camp. And they also do big band camp for the kids. What an opportunity to learn if that got added on to your tour, you know, as you go different places that you start sharing, you know, you add some music camps in the summer. So I'm just throwing that out for your just to think about it.
It is one of the things that we now encourage, though. Anytime we play a high school, invited to play at a high school,
Yeah.
we ask if there's, you know, a high school jazz band, if they'd like to participate
Right.
in both the, you know, question and answer period, but also to then perform with the band at the end of the show.
Yeah.
So we are encouraging that, trying to get more students involved.
Yeah.
Camps, we need to be invited.
I'll work on that. my band director is the director of lifelong arts at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp. And she was the president of the Association of Concert Bands, which is an international community band organization. And I got an article in that journal after I came back from this event 2 years ago. And Dennis wrote an article.
What's your question?
My question is, I want to see these musicians at music camps. and showing them.
So I've got a couple. First off, what does your maintenance for instruments look like when you're on the road? Do you have backup instruments, or do you have someone who's a repair tech that's in the band that they've experienced? How do you deal with those emergencies when they come up? I know reeds are one thing, but the whole horn. And then also, mainly for the sax players, because I'm a sax player, who did you listen to when you were developing as a musician? Who's your inspiration outside of maybe the Glenn Miller Band context, but solo careers or other bands, things like that?
So who's Randolph?
Well, your first question, almost every break that we have, I try to get my horns to the repair shop because humidity, altitude changes, even just riding in the bus, the horn vibrates. And can, over time, get the keys loose or pads loose or something. Reeds, of course, are the hardest to maintain because of the altitude and the weather changes, because we're moving different states, you know. As far as any kind of spares, I have a spare mouthpiece for clarinet and a spare mouthpiece for alto. And one guy actually left his mouthpiece at a gig, so I had to lend him my spare. I said, "Don't drop this thing, it's my only spare." But yeah, maintenance, and sometimes it can be very, very expensive, depending on how long we're on the road. Back in the day, when I first joined, we were on the road damn near 6 months at a time. And there was no time, yeah, I mean, you get to a repair shop in any town USA if you can find one. You want to get a good guy, not just some idiot, you know, who just doesn't know what they're doing. But yeah, it's hard to maintain, and the instrument working the way it should work. And again, the reeds, that's probably the most difficult. He knows I complain about reed standard every day.
I'm just going to add one thing to what Kevin said about the reeds. Part of it is just kind of dealing with the situation as best as you can, right? Sometimes the horn's not going to work perfectly. I have a sticky key right now, that's just the way it is. Or learning to play with what reeds you have. I'm going to finish with this. Kevin has, I'm not kidding, a 5-year-old reed that he still plays. It's black, it's jet black. He still plays it. And we call it Chauncey.
It is pretty disgusting. But every couple of months, and that's a great reed for playing like Boulder, Colorado, which is, you know, almost 6,000 feet. But I can always rely on it. Always rely on old Chauncey. But I put it in hydrogen peroxide for about 3 minutes, and then I take it out, wipe it off, put it on isopropyl alcohol for a few minutes, take it off, wipe it out, back to the hydrogen peroxide, and then I put it right back in the reed case. And it's to the far right. I know which one it is. That's the blackest one. It's disgusting, but it plays great. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, actually, my first instrument was drums. So I'm a rock and roller at heart. Then I picked up the saxophone, saxophone, it's, well, Cannonball Adderley, Charlie Parker.
Oh, yeah.
Big band wise, well, of course, the guys in Miller Band, Count Basie, Marshall Royal, and Johnny Hodges for crying out loud. And then not their solo stuff too, but the big band stuff. And then I picked up the clarinet, and of course Buddy DeFranco and Peanuts Hucko and all those guys. You know, the list goes on. And then I picked up the flute and studied a lot of classical flute, all kinds of jazz flute. I was really into Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull, doing that beatboxing thing. Gosh, I still struggle with that, very difficult style to play. But the saxophone, David Sanborn, you know, there's a little lick that we pass around. That's all it is, right? But that's the classical David Sanborn lick. And then I get the other guys in the band doing it, right? So it's like a little joke. But yeah, there's so many musicians, tenor sax, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Johnny Griffin, English guy, Tubby Hayes, fantastic, Stanley Turrentine, you name it.
Let's keep this.
Question for each of the 4 GMO guys in the panel. When and under what circumstances was the first time you became aware of Glenn Miller's music?
Oh, that's great. Became aware of Glenn Miller's music. Great question. I don't have the answer for that. And I didn't even know until I was in college that there was still a touring band. So, yeah, I don't have the answer for that. I also want to correct myself, too, just real quick here, but I mentioned when I started with the band, it was with Larry O'Brien. That's incorrect. I did play with Larry O'Brien, but it was with Jimi Henderson that I started. So that's a whole different story.
Yeah, I became aware of Glenn's music, I think in high school, in jazz band, we played String of Pearls, Moonlight Serenade, In the Mood, all of that stuff. And then, again, in college, that's when I became aware that there was a touring Glenn Miller Orchestra. I had a couple friends that had played with the band. So high school first, I believe.
Yeah, so for me, my grandfather played the radio all the time, and I know I heard In the Mood as a very young kid, but this might break your hearts, so I apologize, but most young musicians that like big bands, they typically gravitate toward the more jazz-oriented bands, like Buddy Rich Big Band, Woody Herman, Stan Kenton, and the Glenn Miller stuff is more, I guess, maybe an acquired taste. That you don't get it right away as a young musician. You like the stuff that's fast and very complex and loud, you know, and just aggressive jazz music. And then as you become an adult, you take on this Glenn Miller stuff and you realize, wow, there's some really good stuff here. But most young kids, they get more excited about the other, well, that was back when I was a kid. Today, it's a whole other thing with the bands that they might like. It's the big fat band, right?
Yeah.
And there's still some big bands that the kids are getting excited about, but I mean, how many years have gone by? So anyway, that's a long answer, but yeah, I heard the stuff as an early kid, but I really didn't dig in until right before I had the job. And I said, oh boy, I better learn this stuff.
My folks had a massive record collection. I listened to all kinds of things, and let's see what this is. Bands like Seals and Crofts. I heard Frank Sinatra and the Beatles and whatever, but I had a Glenn Miller record, my folks' Glenn Miller record. And I put it on, I'm doing some chores or whatever, and this song is lasting for a long time. The record should be over. It was Pennsylvania 6 5000, and they had a Pennsylvania 6, but Pennsylvania 6. That's what it is. But that was my first listening to Glenn Miller, was that record.
For the 4 guys in the band, not counting the 37 charts, out of all the time that you've been on the band, is there one chart that gets called up once in a while that made you always go, ah, here we go? And is there another one besides Moonlight Serenade or In the Mood that you do on autopilot?
I think for myself, when I was with Jimi Henderson, he would do Tail End Charlie so fast. I mean it, but yeah. Oh, nice. Again, if you didn't hear me, with Jimi Henderson, it was Tail End Charlie. That thing, he just counted it off, and my fingers and tongue didn't work. That was probably the toughest one for me.
a good question. I'm not quite sure. I'll say as far as the songs on autopilot, you know, we play all the big hits at every show. I think at this point I've got all those memorized, and some of the more common songs that we play, like almost like secondary hits, like Kalamazoo isn't in every show, but you know, I know that one like the back of my hand, or Apple Tree, stuff like that. Anything we play a lot, we got all those memorized. As far as the challenging stuff, any songs that we kind of groan when we play them, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. There's maybe a couple of them.
So for me, the favorite one of them, there's a handful, but Larry O'Brien would call Bugle Call Rag a lot. There's a big drum feature on that, and to me that was kind of exciting to play. Then of course, you know what was interesting, when I first joined the band, Larry played beautiful ballads, right? But because of that, almost every other tune was a ballad. So I'm a young 26-year-old kid, and it's, you know, drummer, and it's every tune is a ballad. I'm just sitting back there like, what are we doing, another ballad? You know, as I got older, it's like, wow, that's really some beautiful music. But it took me a while to grow into that. But there was one at My Love, Three Loves. There was a few that he would call, and the band, we would just all look, you know, it's just like, not again. But Larry sounded beautiful on it, so I know why he did it.
My second favorite chart in the book is Moonlight in Vermont, 145. That's a great chart. And I'll never forget, we were in Japan, and we do the same show in Japan. Mission to Moscow. And Larry was really excited that day, maybe too much coffee or something. He counted that thing off so damn fast. I go up to solo, and as I'm walking to the mic, he says, "Sorry, Kev, good luck." Thanks, Larry.
We're gonna have to get you guys to lunch, so I'm gonna have to be able to take one more.
One more, yeah.
Yeah, one Morgan and one more Glenn, for sure. But there's a good
I'm so sorry that I missed.
This is a question out of ignorance, I'm sure. Eric played in the Mood a bunch of Miller things in high school, but there was mention made Thursday night at the outdoor concert. Was that Thursday? I have no idea, but about authentic Miller arrangements being accessible to that band. You hear these arrangements over and over by groups up and down, and I wonder what is the difference and what are the ramifications of the official book that you play, the arrangements that are legitimate, and all of the other bands that play these charts. What are those differences? Are there copyright issues? Just explain the difference between the legitimacy of your book and your arrangements versus what you hear in every high school jazz band or any of the bands that play.
So before we get into the technical side of it, part of it is your respect for what you're looking at. Maybe that's not the best word, because there are amateurs that respect it, but it's playing that at a higher level. So
As opposed to, let's say you're watching a band and you see a drummer who's kind of, you know, enjoys what he's doing, but really is not capable enough to really get those things popping or playing right in time, or when the winds aren't playing totally together, like exactly together. That's what a lot of times that's what you're hearing, or it's out of tune. And all it takes, you can have four of the greatest musicians, and the fifth one be a total dud. And we experience that on the road, and it just destroys everything. So part of it, before we get into the technical stuff, is really the level of musicianship behind it and caring about how you play.
Very obvious. It always is. You hear this music all day long, and then the Glenn Miller Orchestra plays it, and everything is sharp, and it's so wonderful here.
I don't know why they're passing the microphone. I think it has something to do with the estate and the licensing and all that, which I could maybe address based upon some knowledge of that.
Published,
But you want to, Charles, read, because that's something that's
I don't really have the answer that he's looking for though. But, I think, some songs are published, right? So they're easy for people to find and get. Sometimes there's simple changes to some of the, different music. Some songs are transcribed. They're close, but not 100%. I don't know. I think there's a lot of different answers to your question though. And I think one of them, like Ray pointed out properly, is the level of musicianship too.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll add, and Charles just touched on this, I think a lot of times when you're listening to a high school band play like Moonlight Serenade, it's probably some sort of transcription, right? Whereas we have like the original source material. So that's like a song where our chart is going to be just a little bit different than all the ones that have been transcribed from the recording. So they might be close, but I think that's probably the case for like a lot of the high school bands that are playing this stuff. It's probably been transcribed or sourced elsewhere, versus we have like the original scores or source material, like note for note what Glenn would play. All right, thank you.
We're going to move on. So one thing in answer to your question, Glenn, and then we'll put one that gives some appreciation for these guys doing this. This has been a wonderful experience. There's a British band leader named Sid Lawrence. It's my favorite story. This is coming from the Glenn Miller estate perspective. Glenn Miller Productions has an exclusive license for our music. Period, end of statement. It just is the way it is. Now, a gentleman by the name of Sid Lawrence in Britain was very popular. This is going to be you're going to find this an interesting answer. The now defunct Glenn Miller Society in the UK, their members worked very diligently and hard to transcribe what they thought was the Glenn Miller Music Library for Sid Lawrence. And for many years, up until now, I still hear people say the best not Glenn Miller sound and band of all time, other than Glenn Miller himself, was Sid Lawrence, Saint Sid Lawrence. And I always kind of scoff at that because from the Steve Miller's point of view and Mr. McKay Sr.'s point of view, Sid was a thief. But we won't go into that. That's a legal matter. But the thing is, and this is interesting, and this is why I like Charles' answer, Sid's musicians were so good that they did a great job with what wasn't the actual music library, but a facsimile of it that people had cobbled together. So it can work both ways. I mean, we could provide these guys with the best possible source material, and yet, if they were incompetent, it would be horrible. But guess what? They have the real deal, and they're competent. So guess what? You hear what you hear, which is phenomenal. And that's a good way to end this. This is a phenomenal group of people. We are blessed to have them within our midst. And these guys are so special. And I can't begin to tell you from the point of view of the history and the point of view of, like I said, from the estate point of view and the documentation, legally, all aspects. This is one wonderful group of people to know, to be associated with, and have the privilege and honor to work with on a daily basis. So please thank them all.